to try. Would you like
to? Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to crumble!
I'm Joshua Kemble, and welcome to Joshua Kemble's Livestream. I've been a freelance illustrator and graphic designer for over 20 years. I was an art director for 9 years. And when I'm not art directing and working on illustrations and graphic designs, I'm working on comic books and graphic novels, and that's usually what I do during my streams. And while conversations can go all over the place on this stream, from spicy and entertaining to goofy and silly, one thing stays consistent throughout every stream. I'll always be working on art. So pull up a chair, get your art supplies out, and get ready for an entertaining show that'll keep you company while you work on your own personal art projects. This is Joshua Kemble's Art Stream. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Joshua Kemble's Art Stream. This is episode 308. If I look tired, it's because I've been pulling a lot of late nights, kind of catching up on stuff. And on the dock for today, it's we've got to finish colors for page 80 of Not Death But Love, the Strange Supernatural Story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. And then I'm going to catch you guys up with a bunch of interesting drama. I ended up missing Artcasters on Sunday. A bunch of crazy stuff's happened the last few days, and I've been plugging away on this page and went down a rabbit hole of watching a bunch of YouTube history videos. But yeah, it's been a pretty exciting few days. Tumultuous, to say the least. But I am still here, still kicking, and ready to rock and roll. So yeah, let's get into it. Let's get into the art stuff. Because my goal today is to finish colors for page 80 of Not Death But Love, the Strange Supernatural Story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning. I hope you guys are doing okay. And are being productive and getting your own stuff done. If you hear sounds in the background, it's because it's a daytime stream, and my son's still on summer vacation, and my wife is hanging out with him, and they're going over video games that he's made. He's been playing a lot of these games where you like invent your own video games. It's pretty cool. All right, let's get into this this art stuff. So, okay, so if you look over here on this side, there's the page I'm going to be working on. Robert and Elizabeth are leaving the theater. They're going to get stopped by an usher at the door, who's basically saying that Senor Bosco requests you would do him the honor of visiting him in his dressing room. And then Elizabeth is saying we would be delighted. He takes him backstage, and that's going to get us to backstage at Bosco's backstage setup at the theater. So this is a historical fiction graphic novel about the Brownings, about Elizabeth Barrett Browning and her deep dive into seances. And at this point, we're kind of seeing the divide between Elizabeth and Robert when it comes to skepticism. So this should be pretty fun. Let's get into it. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the grid. Right now I have a grid on here. And we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff while we color. So everything in magenta is the stuff I need to color today. And then we'll kind of get into it. Let me open up, because I don't think this has Elizabeth's eye color or Robert's eye color. So what we need to do is pull up a page. I need to find one that has both of those eye colors. And let me make sure I've got it. Okay, I think this will work. So we'll pull open page 78 from a couple pages ago, and then we'll be ready to rock and roll and work on comics. So yeah, so today, man, the last few days have been just one thing after another. So on a good note, the pitch is pretty much written. I've talked about this a little bit. There's a writer that I'm going to be collaborating with, who's represented by my literary agency, and we're going to put together a pitch. We met. He was a really cool guy. We had a lot in common, and all of everything's lined up for the pitch. So basically, I just have to go over. That's one thing I need to do today that I can't do on stream, is like going over the pitch, like revising the text parts, so that it's like an equal collaboration in that sense. And I'm contributing like whatever I'm offering to the publishers. And then from there, I think the script's already been broken into two parts, which is really exciting because we're going to pitch it as two books. And from there, I'm going to pick like a 5-page section to kind of make 5 or 6 pages that will represent like what it could look like. So that's pretty exciting. While I'm talking, let's make sure I'm working too. How about that? So anyhow, everything's lined up for that. So that's cool. And I was about to get going on finishing this page when, like, and by the way, like, so I missed Artcasters on Sunday. It's because I lost track of the fact that we had switched to Sundays, which I know is awful. But I'm still getting used to us switching to Sundays. And so for some reason, my brain defaulted and thought it was on Thursdays still. And so you can hopefully forgive me for missing Artcasters on my own channel nonetheless. So I'm still going to be catching up on that. That was Sunday. Got a lot of work done. And applied for a bunch of positions, as well as, like, put feelers out for freelance work and stuff like that. So then it turns out, like, so Monday I get these pages penciled, which is pretty cool. And then Tuesday, which is yesterday, I'm planning on like live streaming, getting what I have done right now done. And first thing in the morning, I find out that the recruiting agency that I've been using, the recruiting program I've been using, has a glitch. And so I'm like, I contact the company, and then it turns out that even though this is like the biggest recruiting site on the internet, it's like they couldn't explain what had gone wrong. And so it turns out that like a month and a half of applications that have been sending out have just been going out to like nobody. And they promised to fix it. And then I look, and it turns out they just deleted my whole profile. So basically everything I've sent out for the last month has been totally useless, which is really annoying because I've been spending, like a good hour a day on that facet of kind of trying to kind of, see my career move forward and stuff like that. And also is kind of annoying because now I have to like reset that up and re-look for a bunch of work. And so that was extremely frustrating. And I was dealing with that, as well as there were some health insurance complications that have gotten sorted out supposedly this morning. And that was like a big surprise and thing I had to deal with. And so it was just like, it was all like reality based, just, like not really exciting problems, like, but it was just like one of those 2 steps forward and 20 steps back kind of last few days, where I'm making a lot of good progress on the book. The collaboration's coming along well, but I've been set back a couple days just by like logistical nonsense that just comes up inevitably as you're adulting. And yeah, it was so anyhow, so that's what I got to deal with yesterday. It was like fixing things that were like, those moments where you're like dealing with a situation where you're like, you had one job, like one job, those kind of moments. That was all of yesterday, was just being on phone lines, talking to people who didn't do like a really simple task, and basically because of it put me in really precarious situations. So anyhow, so today is my like clear the mind, like get back focused on the comic, get a page done, and then after this we're going to work on the pitch. I'm going to look through the pitch, revise it, and get at least the text part going so that we can then get further into this. Did I color his hat wrong? I think I colored Robert's hat wrong here, which makes me concerned a little bit. Let's see here. Yes, I did color his hat wrong. Okay. Well, that's good. That's good to know. We're going to go ahead and fix that. That's an easy fix. I apparently also colored Robert's hat wrong. Anyhow, so well, let's finish the hat that can be colored right. And then we'll go back and correct that old hat. That old hat. That old hat there by Robert. So anyhow, needless to say, it's been like a very contentious and difficult few days. But I'm glad to be back on track and kind of getting more progress done. I'm very excited about this pitch, so we'll see where I can get with that today within reason. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that I need to catch up on today that I got behind on because of like, again, like a website and like a health insurance company, both kind of just screwing up, like, you know. Um, and it's like, I know these things happen, but it is one of those things that, for those of you who live in like Canada or something like that, I envy the fact that you guys live in a country where like there's not like an immediate concern about like health insurance, but it's like if somebody screws up your health insurance info and you know you're living in the US, it's like it's a big deal, cuz it's like you literally, end up in a scenario where you can't get sick. And luckily it's getting resolved, so I'm glad that's the case, but it's one of those like, when you got a kid especially, it's like a very important thing to make sure you have health insurance in the US. And I know there's people out there who aren't insured, and honestly I might be joining their ranks in a couple months. But it's important that it's like, oh my gosh, it needed to be a couple months, not like today. And that was just like a logistical error that was just like incredibly difficult to kind of deal with when I need to be working and applying for work. And then also being set back on just finding out that like a month and a half of queries a month of queries that I've been putting out there, it's like I might as well have just been playing a video game for like a month. So I'm trying not to be like negative, but it's just it was a it was a trying few days, let's put it that way. But what we're doing right now is like we're doing color selections. Ronnie said, "What's up? How's it going?" Jim Lujan said, "Hey champ, how's it going?" Um, Jim's been dropping the champ and chief. Have you ever had that happen where you go somewhere and somebody's like, "Hey chief," and you're like, "I don't." Now I don't think that's how Jim's meaning it. but it is one of those funny things of there's like a chief off kind of thing that happens where people will be like, "Hey, chief, how's it going, buddy?" And you're like, it's like the tone of voice that they'll say like chief or buddy. You're like, you don't mean what you're saying. Like it's like an unspoken kind of like boom, mic dropped, fight to be had, gauntlet thrown kind of thing. Which is not what I think Jim means there, but I thought that was funny because I do think it was a couple a couple streams ago where I think Jim called. I think it was Jim who called. Like he. Oh my goodness! I think he called Gary Hodges chief on a stream, and it was one of the funniest things. Hey there, chief. um. Nice. Ronnie said, hanging in there, buddy. If you guys haven't checked out Ronnie's stuff, you should. Comics de la Muerte is a really great show with him and Jason Alexander, both who are cartoonists that I really dig. And you guys should be following Crimson Owl Comics on YouTube so that you can check that out. So yeah, so this got me like anyhow, the whole like hiccup yesterday just got me thinking about one of the bizarre things and tough things about kind of working on creative work uh, is I think that inevitably you're be facing just like crazy odds. Like um that's sort of the nature of creative, and half of it's like a mind game, at least in my experience. And again, it's funny, I've been doing this for 20 years or something now, and it still feels like I'm figuring things out, like and I think that's a weird thing about like having a lot of experience in a field. You can give people like pretty solid advice or tips, but the one thing I think a lot of people may not talk about is just the fact that like the more you know about something, um, the harder it is to actually like give like hardcore black and white, feedback or advice, because you start realizing like how much everyone's journey is different. And then also just like how much like chance and luck is kind of involved in this stuff. Not to say that you can just sit back and like roll the dice and hope for like luck to work out, because that's not usually how things work. But it's just to say that like the one thing I can say that's been consistent in my 2 decades of doing this is like you kind of I mean, it's a trope or whatever, but it's like that idea that, it's opportunity meets, I can't even remember what they call it. People say there's a truism about it, which is basically like effort meets opportunity. So the point being like, you kind of can't control entirely the opportunities that you're given. You can kind of like pursue them, but at the end of the day, like you kind of have to be making efforts so that when opportunities do arise, like you can kind of be there to say yes. And so that's part of why I'm even doing this pitch as well, because I think it's a really good opportunity. And I feel bad because I feel like that project in particular is now delayed because of my you know snafus yesterday. But there's no guarantees, like, and that's the thing about kind of like creative work and stuff like that. But I think half the game with that kind of thing is to try to kind of retain a positive outlook, um and to just keep kind of trucking and keep putting your best foot forward wherever you can. And it may seem like really simplistic, but it's like that might be the super secret, that I've found, at least in my own career, is you just kind of keep trying, and you have to be a little stubborn, and you have to try to retain optimism. And so that's my big battle right now, is like I'm trying to stay optimistic, despite some setbacks, um, and uh, and just kind of continue the belief that this can actually happen, because it does. It does kind of work out. Like, that's the bizarre thing. Um, but anyhow, so hopefully we can get that comic pitch going. I'm pretty excited about that. It's a big opportunity. Again, like, the writer, may not be somebody you guys have heard of, but he's definitely been heard of by a lot of people. Um, and the script is excellent. And also he just seems like a really good dude. So he'll be really fun to work with. So I want to get that going ASAP. But I also need to water my garden that currently exists. Meaning, like, I have a book deal for this, so that means this has to get done, like, regardless. Uh, and also, this is a great book too, so it's one of those things. And hopefully, these kind of snowball, in theory, into kind of creating more and more momentum, and then, like, a year and a half from now, I can look back and be like, oh man, I'm glad I kept optimistic and kept working on these things. So anyhow, I know it sounds like probably like a lot of the things I'm saying might be kind of vague, but just saying, like, this week started really bad. It started off super bad, and now it's like, you know, I you know, I am retaining hope and kind of optimism, and things are looking brighter again. But man, it was pretty bleak, like, yesterday. It's like, you know what it reminds me of? When I was a young artist, I guess I'm saying young, in my late 20s. I don't know if I think I've told this story before. So Jacob's Apartment originally was with a different publisher, like, a long time ago. And it was like right after I did Numb, I'd gotten this, like, publishing deal, from a known publisher in comics, and I was really excited about it. And I got, like, a good chunk of the graphic novel done. Um, and I mean, keep in mind, like, that's a graphic novel that I colored, I lettered, I did everything on. And I was still a pretty young artist, so I was keeping all of my art on an external hard drive at the time, and I had no backups of that art. And I ended up, I write about this in book two of two stories, but I ended up getting, like, jumped, like, where I lived in Long Beach, and got my stuff stolen. And one of the things that got stolen was my external hard drive, because I would take that to, like, where I was going. Basically, when I lived in Long Beach, I'd take my external hard drive. I didn't have a car at the time, because I grew up kind of poor, so I couldn't afford a car or the insurance. And so I would take, like, the bus from, like, Cal State Long Beach campus to go to grad school. And then I'd bring my work, on this external hard drive where I kept all my art. And I know in retrospect that is probably the dumbest idea to do without a backup. But this was, like, how I learned that lesson. So I ended up getting, like, jumped. And then, so beyond just getting, like, beaten up and all the kind of difficulties and, like, things that does to you mentally, I also was dealing with, I lost, like, all of my artwork for, like, 10 years. I lost, like, 10 years worth of artwork in that incident, which I think hurt more than the physical thing, including the graphic novel I was doing, which ended up extending my deadline. I think that might have contributed to the publisher dropping the book, but the publisher kind of dropped the book when I finished the last page of it. Like, I had everything done. They were giving me feedback throughout the entire process. And the last minute, without warning, they were just kind of like, yeah, we're also dropping you. And I was like, wow, okay. So I had worked at that point like 5 or 6 years on this project. And I had just moved to Portland with my wife. And then I was being told this thing that I had spent like 6 years on was just a no go. Um, and I kind of couldn't figure out whether that might have been from the loss of those pages and the time loss that happened, as a result of that. But I remember at the time, just like that was one of the hardest things to overcome. And yet that book did eventually see the light of day. It ended up getting a better editor. And in my opinion, the edits that, like, Kendra did, the editor at Graphic Mundi, were so much better. So it ended up like working out in the end, but it was like a decade or possibly over a decade to kind of see that happen. Um, and like the only reason I'm recounting that is not to like have like a sob story where it's like woe is me. It's to say that like that would have been a really easy time to just kind of throw in my cards and just give up, because that incident set me back. My portfolio was set back by like a decade, um, you know, and, and all of this effort that I had put in on this stuff was just for nothing. It was very frustrating. It was very hard to deal with. But my point is like, I kind of persisted through it and, failed to let that like dictate what would get done, um and failed to let that dictate what my art career would be. Um i just refused. I shouldn't say failed. I refused to let that stop me. um and while it was a setback, it like ended up kind of working out. And again, because I kept working and kept like positive and kept persistent, you know, um, other opportunities came up that I could not have envisioned. Um, and you know, so my point is just like there are times, I guess, what I've been experiencing the last few days is nothing compared to like that, right? But my point is there are just times, in your art path or in life where it would be really easy to just kind of throw in the towel and call it, because it's like you have every reason to. And there's times where like it's not even like a matter of like, oh, you'd be a bad person if you threw in the towel, because it's like, no, I mean, like, I think most people would understand that if like you kind of stopped your art career because you lost a decade of work and couldn't walk for like 3 months, like, and it screwed up your like, for me, that screwed up my graduate career. I wasn't able to like go outside without like feeling terror. It's definitely good material for like the second book, uh, of two stories, because it's like really dramatic and pretty like psychologically was like really hard to kind of deal with. But at the same time, it's like there I have seen, at least in my own life, the value of like you just kind of like everyone out there has like weird stories and weird struggles and terrible things happen, but it's kind of how you respond to those things that's going to kind of dictate like your level of, I guess, whatever you would define as success in this crazy creative world. And my point is, I think there's a lot to be said for persistence within those scenarios because, again, like, sometimes you'll end up with a better thing than you could have imagined, as a result. And even in like some of the hardest situations. So that's my little like bent of optimism. And I know I'm kind of rambling, but but my point is, like, that book also still ended up coming out and leading to this book that I'm working on. So it's like, and there was a book after that, and like I've kind of kept carving away at this stuff, regardless, because that's kind of what you do. Like, that's kind of how these things get done. Um, so anyhow, that to me is a kind of fascinating story, but again, like, it's probably better. This is one of the struggles for I think for cartoonists out there, is part of why I use comics to to communicate, is like, Two Stories Book 2 tells that story so much better than I can. you know and I can't wait to get to that, either to book 2 of Two Stories. um but it's like, I think part of what draws me to sequential work for storytelling is the fact that, like, I can talk about something like that emotionally impacted me, or maybe even draw from it to make fiction. um but it's like not quite as impactful, or it doesn't feel like I'm communicating fully, where it's like with graphic novels and comics and stuff, I feel like I'm able to communicate fully what I'm trying to say, or to fully recount like an event that happened, and be able to give that extra like visual texture to like the narrative, so that you're able to kind of communicate things that are harder to kind of put into words. Um, and I think that's what, like, at its best, I think that's one of the reasons I love comics. Um, so anyhow, that's a long-winded rant. But needless to say, it has been a tough few days. But not, as far as tough days go, not not the end of the world. Okay. So, how are you guys doing, and what are you guys working on? I'd love to hear about it. I'm gonna try to be getting back in just the flow of doing consistent streams. Because I'm kind of upping the speed on these pages. There will be days where I can't stream, right? Because I'll be working on some stuff that maybe I can't stream while doing. But in general, I think I've been making a pretty conscious effort to be streaming more, and kind of, bringing you guys along on this ride that I'm on, Let's see here. So right now we're doing the same colors that we used for the usher at the front of the theater are the colors that I'm using here. I also need to color his pantalones here. I know. If Paul Pate is watching, he's going to be so disappointed that I've added pants on this page. But yes, I've added pants. I will say, Jim Luhan's been posting some really cool sneak peeks of the full fungus on his Patreon. So if you guys aren't Patreonies on Jim Luhan's channel, you should consider it, because he's given a lot of really neat sneak peeks of his upcoming movie. And I, for one, am really excited. I think one of the things that's really inspiring about Jim is kind of like some of the stuff I've been talking about. I feel like he's a really good example of that. Like, where Jim is one of those guys who, like, hell or high water, he's going to be making, movies. And again, like, depending on, you know, no matter like how tough it gets, he'll always be kind of working on films, because he's a badass like that. All right, so we're getting there. This page is actually a heck of a lot easier than the previous page. The previous page, because we had to draw, like, I think we ended up drawing on page 79 like probably 200 to 300 people, um, which is kind of insane for like one comic page. I even got the comment, I think it was Jeff, who was like, yeah, that's my favorite thing when a writer has an opera scene where you have to have a massive crowd in an opera house. He sarcastically, of course. But we pulled it off and we got through the gauntlet there. So hopefully this part goes relatively quickly. If you guys haven't too, and you're watching this stream and you get a kick out of it, please hit that like button. Yeah, I was watching some lore on. There's a show that I was not familiar with. This is a long story, so I kind of like tangentially like this through this stream I've made friends, right? And there's a buddy that I've made through this stream named Adam Lore, who knows a guy named Brett Keane. And I had never heard of this guy, and I ended up like having one interaction with him a couple years back on stream, and I thought it was really weird because he like debated me or something, and it was like a really weird kind of conversation. I wish the video were still online. But anyhow, so then afterwards, I remember he posted like a video where he like recounted our discussion, and it was like the weirdest conversation. Like it was the weirdest take you could ever make of a conversation. It's like if you were to recount like in the worst faith possible, and try to kind of paint like, let's say you and I had a conversation and I just said like hello, and you were like, hey, how's it going? And I'm like, pretty good, like, how's the weather? And it's like, pretty good. And then I did a YouTube video where I'm like, he says the weather is being controlled by evil villains. And you're like, wait, that's not at all what we said. And then you go to look for the video and it doesn't exist. And you're like, okay, so now I can't even recount the conversation we had because they took down the video of the actual conversation. So anyhow, point being, I was like, okay, now I need to know who this guy is. And so I looked up Brett Keane and I found out he's kind of like a meme online. That he's well, at least somewhat like a legendary, what people call like lol cow. And so I was like, wow, this is really fascinating. And so I remember from that getting introduced to a show called The Drunken Peasant. So I kind of reverse engineered this because I was like, well, why is this guy like so well known? And then I ended up like watching a couple Drunken Peasants things with Brett Keane and reading more about him. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, this guy is like a legendary. And also the thing he had done with me in that one conversation turns out is like something he does like religiously with people. And so it's caused him to burn a lot of bridges because again, like, people tend to not like if you're like conversing with them and then you completely misrepresent what was said and just kind of paint yourself as like a huge like victor in this like conversation that never happened. So anyhow, this is a long-winded way of saying that was my roundabout way for like finding out who the Drunken Peasants were, because I had never really heard of that show. And it was fairly entertaining. It's very like raucous and kind of like Howard Stern showish. And I think it might not be quite where it was at the time, but I, like, again, I had never really heard of this thing, and through Adam I got introduced to it. And so it was like this weird kind of experience where I was like, wow, that's crazy. It's just a crazy way to find out about someone or a show. So anyhow, like, that was just like an incident from a couple years ago. But after all this nonsense that happened the last few days, I just decided to go down a rabbit hole. Oh, I think Ronnie sent me something. Oh, cool. Ronnie sent me a panel a set of 3 panels from his comic. It's pretty exciting. Looks awesome, Ronnie. So anyhow, so then I end up like I think it was like yesterday after all this madness was happening. It was like super late. I didn't want to wake up everybody in the house, streaming, but I needed to catch up on all the work I had gotten behind on because again, this page was one that I was going to color yesterday. So that's where I was like remembering this whole like weird conversation that happened like a couple years back, and I started getting curious about the drunken peasants, and so I looked up like there's a channel that had like the entire history of that show, and so I watched like a bunch of it. It's like such like YouTube drama stuff, but it was super entertaining and interesting. And so anyhow, so now I'm kind of a little more familiar with the lore of an internet show that I think was once a big deal. And I think still to this day probably has like a bit of a reach, for sure. They seem to have a very dedicated audience. So anyhow, that was interesting. So that's what I was doing yesterday. I was like trying to cool down and not freak out about, you know, some setbacks. And also listening to this really hilarious, like, recount of like the history of this podcast that I just kind of got introduced to by accident. Yeah, it was so weird. Like, again, when he had posted a recount of our conversation, um, when he recounted it on his own channel, he was like, known atheist attacks, and he was calling me an atheist, and I was like, but I'm not an atheist. Like, and then like his recounting of it was like the weirdest thing because it was like nothing that he said was stuff I said. What's up? Yeah, and then also it's bizarre because he'd say atheist like it was this horribly like unusual thing when it's like I know plenty of atheists. Like there's nothing wrong with it. Like again, it's not. Yeah, I was an atheist for a really long period of time. It's just funny that when he made the video though, he's like he kind of made this weird assumption. This is years ago, but it was just funny where he had made this assumption that like because I disagreed with him politically, I must be an atheist. It was just a funny experience. But it becomes funnier when I actually find out who the guy was that I was talking to because I had no idea, I was just on my buddy's stream just kind of like working on art and then this guy did like one of the most bad faith discussions I've ever had, and then had a YouTube video where he like painted the discussion as if it were something different. And I was like, wow, this guy is not an above board player. Little did I know. So anyhow, I have no desire to get into drama with that guy or anything like that, but I have to say, I have since looked into the history of who I was dealing with there, and it's pretty funny and entertaining, to say the least. So that was an interesting early kind of YouTube. I think I was maybe like a couple streams into doing this like live hangout thing. Yeah, anyhow, so interesting times. I learned some valuable tips from that. It's like that meme, where like online, there used to be, it's not as common anymore because it's just such a cheap tactic. But I think back in the day on YouTube, there used to be like people who would just edit what you said. Like you could say anything. You could be like, like within 2 hours, you're going to give enough words where somebody, if they wanted to like edit your words together to make you say something awful, they would do it. But it's like so obvious when it's done, especially if you have the context of the original video, that's kind of fallen out of fashion. I think in most even drama circles online, because that was like back in the Wild West days. And so it's just funny. It was funny to me to have that experience, like maybe a couple of years ago. So it wasn't like that long ago, and it was like that kind of experience where it's like, yeah, it was very very interesting, very educational. I don't know what made me think of that. I think it's because like yesterday, I just was like for some reason I remembered that and was thinking, huh, I want to look into some of the lore of this guy and the channel that I guess made him well known. So anyhow, so that was interesting. Let's see what else. So I've been alternating between that and like watching like History Channel type documentaries about the Israeli army and weird awesome operations they've pulled off, like despite the odds. And I don't know. And that's like been fulfilling. Like, have you guys ever gotten in those moods? This is something maybe you guys could tell me. Like the Ken Burns documentary mood where you're like, man, I'm going to put on like a giant Ken Burns, World War II documentary and just kind of chill. Anyhow, it was like one of those moods where I was like, I want to learn about these crazy military operations. Somebody had mentioned one of them, and then it made me curious. My computer's being a little laggy here. So hopefully I'm not freezing out. Let me know if I am on stream. I'm sure it's getting a little jumpy, but hopefully the audio is at least clear. It does look like it's jumping a bit. Jumping and jiving. Okay. So we're just busting through these pages. I feel like with the last page, it was making me start to question whether I could do comics at all. Because it was just taking so long, That last page probably ended up taking about a week to do. And I was like, oh man, I can't do this on like a week to do a page kind of schedule. That's not going to be sustainable. But then getting to this page, I'm like, oh, okay, this goes like a lot quicker when you don't have to draw 200 people on a panel. So we're getting there. We're getting through this. There's once I finish this panel, I think maybe even once I finish the selections here, we might take a little break. I need to get a coffee refill and yeah, but the point is this whole stream, I'm going to finish these flats. I'm going to finish them. And that's kind of the goal for this stream, is to get through these flats. Okay, so let's save where we're at. Again, this is just the flat color layer. If you look here, that'll show you what it looks like with the shading, which thank goodness the shading makes it look a lot better. And I'm just going to save. We're going to play a trailer our first hour trailer for Jacob's apartment. Let me know if you guys have ever had like a weird internet run-in experience. I'd love to hear about it in the chats. Okay, here is Jacob's apartment trailer, and I'll be right back. Speak clearly, it seems that only in dreams can we these things we've seen and walk around breathing things. I don't know the part to play in this heart of mine. There's dissonant things, they split at the seams. All right. So we're back. We're going to be working on these flats and getting these done. Probably like maybe another hour or two. Maybe less. Who knows? They're going pretty quick. Luckily, this page was not as crazy as the last few. And while we do that, I want to mention, have you guys ever seen the movie The Birds by Alfred Hitchcock? We rewatched that a couple weeks ago just for fun. And I was just reminded of like how good Hitchcock was, because it's such a like ridiculous premise. Like if you think about it, like the premise of that movie is insanity. It's like, I'm going to make like everyday, birds into like this nightmare scenario where they like peck the eyes out of people and all this stuff. But there's a scene in The Birds. Yeah, so Ronnie, of course, has seen that. Well, I mean, Ronnie's seen like every horror movie. That's why you guys should be subscribed to Comics de la Muerte, because they are literally, a horror movie and horror comic. It's like horror related show where they talk about horror. The horror. The horror. But anyhow, so there's this very famous scene in it, and I remember seeing it as a kid and it freaking me out. And it's I know there's some people who like do not take that movie seriously. There's a group of people who think that might be one of the worst Hitchcock movies, but I love it. I think it was great. And there was a scene that scared the living crap out of me as a kid. And it's like right before, like, so the birds like end up, basically the premise of it is if like birds just for some reason decided, you know what, we're going to just kill humans. And just kind of arbitrarily, like they never really fully explain why this incident happens. It's just like, hey, these birds just kind of lose it and decide to start attacking people. I think they get sick of being treated like second-class citizens. Anyhow, point being, there's this famous scene where they're going to an elementary school to pick up their kid, or it's not even their kid. I think it's this. It's like, is it like her niece or something? Anyhow, the main character is like picking up like I think her niece from like a school because they're starting to get paranoid and put two and two together and realize that birds are like attacking people. And as they're entering the elementary school campus to pick up the kid, like they look over to the playground and there's like one crow and it lands on the monkey bars. And they're like, okay. And they walk a little bit faster. And then they look over and there's like 10 crows chilling on the monkey bars. And then they kind of start moving towards the auditorium quicker. And they look back and there's like 100 crows and they're on like the monkey bars and the swings and like they're on the playground just like almost like a battalion just kind of getting ready to attack. And anyhow, so of course like horror movie stuff ensues and of course the birds kind of go crazy and start attacking the elementary school kids and like pecking at them and stuff. But the thing that was scary, and this is where Hitchcock's great, it's kind of like the psychological idea of like when you look over and you see a group of birds, be careful. That was a very like unique to Hitchcock thing where like the thing that was disturbing wasn't actually seeing the birds attack. It was more the creepy feeling you would get when you see them congregating and you've seen them attack because you're like, are they going to attack? Like, no, that's just birds, that's just, wait a minute, are they actually going to attack? And so I remember after watching that movie as a kid, I'd like look out, like, I remember the first time I stepped outside after watching that movie, I saw some like crows on like a phone line. And I was like terrified. Like he had successfully made me feel terrified by just seeing like a murder of crows just like chilling on like a wire, which you see every day. Um Anyhow, I bring that up because uh when I played that trailer, I go outside just like 5 minutes ago. I go outside for a second and like cuz I like to do that when I take my break.
We think we're so all powerful.
Yeah.
And then he's kind of playing with the idea of like, hey, if they wanted to,
Yeah.
If animals wanted to, they could.
Yeah, my wife was pointing out he's kind of playing with the fact that like we can feel really powerful and safe, but he kind of toys with that by being like, hey, if birds wanted to, they could like mess us up, like because there's so many of them. And I even remember the trailer, right, where I think he's like cooking a turkey and he's saying, why would birds want to attack people? That's ridiculous. Anyhow, but anyhow, there's so there was a point to this story that's like a very long-winded Josh type story, which is about 5 minutes ago I went outside and my neighbor's yard, there's like a line of crows on the yard. And I was like, it's happening. And then I realized a lot of people probably haven't seen the birds, so they wouldn't know. And I realized that like Hitchcock very effectively, like even now, even though it's like more of a meme now, it's like he effectively embedded that thought in my head that if you see a murder of crows, watch out because it might mean murder. Anyhow, not the best Hitchcock movie of all time, but it's actually a great one. Like I really enjoy that one. Um, I mean, it's not like Vertigo or something. You know what I mean? It's not like one of his, North by Northwest, like the ones that are like the best like Hitchcock movies. It's not. I wouldn't put it on that list, but still a really good movie.
My favorite is Rope.
Oh, and my wife pointed out Rope, where Hitchcock did that play Rope. That's great too.
And Windows or Rear Window.
Rear Window is easily one of the best. I think my wife's watched that like a million times, and I watched that like a bunch growing up. But like she'll watch that at least once a year, and I totally understand why, because the character acting, the staging, it's just like a masterpiece, And I mean, it's Jimmy Stewart, and like anybody out there, I know there's memes about Jimmy Stewart and stuff, but he's a great actor.
Because he's a thrill seeker to an extent, right? And then you have him in his own backyard witnessing this horror.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, you're a photographer, so you're taking pictures and observing these like extreme moments in life, and then there behind you is like something happening, and it's kind of puts him in their shoes almost, and it also like challenges him into seeing his girlfriend in a different light, and anyway, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And he's become powerless too, so it's like, God, that actually kind of hurt him.
So I don't know how much of that you guys could hear, but like my wife was describing why Rear Window is awesome, which I totally agree. It's a great movie. Yeah, and if you guys don't know, like Rear Window is really, it's just like it's not only layered and brilliant, but it's like he rebuilt like an entire city corner. Like the whole production of that is insane. Philip Chandler said, "Hey Josh, how's it going, Philip? When you were younger, Philip, and saw the birds, I'm sure you saw the birds. Did you have that notorious moment, like where you saw like a group of birds and you're like a little like, what are they up to?" After seeing that movie? Or were you just kind of like, it's corny? Because it's funny. I was just explaining that like I definitely had that moment, where I walked outside just like a minute or two ago, and I saw like a murder of crows on my neighbor's lawn, and I was like, they're up to something. Those birds. They're planning something. Anyhow. Okay, question for chat. Favorite Hitchcock movies? This is a hard one. I feel like if Jim Lujan and Gary ever do a top 5 again, they should challenge themselves to doing a top 5 Hitchcock films, because that's a hard one. Yeah, I mean, you got Strangers on a Train. You got Notorious. You have Rebecca. What was Rebecca? Rebecca was Hitchcock. That's right. Yeah, there's so many good ones. All right. Landon's joining, says, I love Hitchcock. Great. Let me know what your favorite Hitchcock is. I think my all-time favorite, weirdly enough, because I feel like it has everything that I love about Hitchcock, and then it's got Cary Grant. It's like it's probably North by Northwest. That's probably my all-time favorite. Although I gotta say, like Vertigo and Carlotta Valdez, pretty snappy, good-looking lady. So, you know what I'm saying? To be fair, I think most Hitchcock films have some pretty snappy, good-looking ladies, and probably some pretty snappy, good-looking men as well. Weirdly enough, though, let's see here. Okay, we got Philip said, I never saw the birds until much later. It was one of those that escaped me. When I finally saw it, I liked it, but I wasn't impressed as with the others. Yeah, it's good. It like the reason I'm impressed by something like the birds is it's just such a dumb premise. Like it's a really dumb premise, and it shows you that like I think that movie shows you that and I think it's important for us to remember this too, as like cartoonists and storytellers. It's like you can take a really crazy premise and still make something good out of it. It may not be the best thing in the world, but it's like the thing that's impressive to me is that Hitchcock like pulled it off, in the sense that just what a stupid idea, and yet it became he did it. He did it and he pulled it off, and it was pretty good. It wasn't one of his best, but it's like it was pretty incredible. I think Hitchcock's a good example that you can take like a pretty wild premise, that if you told somebody it, they'd be like, that is dumb. Like, you can make it really good, just depending how you craft the story, how you build the tension, how you frame your scenes. Um. So anyhow, that's what I would say there. Philip said, I came in during the Rear Window discussion. It's definitely my favorite, followed closely by Psycho. Psycho's great. You know what's weird that I had forgotten about Psycho? We rewatched that recently too. Is I love the whole kind of melodrama subplot. There's like a misdirect. I had forgotten about. Like, I forget it every time after seeing Psycho, because of course everybody remembers like the hotel and stuff like that. But the whole scene where she's like stealing money from her workplace, and she's having an affair, and it's like it's this just shocking like melodrama soap opera kind of thing happening. And the cop like pulls her over and she's got money in the trunk and like is all tense about the cop, and it's a total misdirect. And he was one of the first to really do that, where he's like giving you this subplot that's a total misdirect. So it's like, you think that's what you're supposed to be nervous about. Is she going to get caught? And little did you know, no, you were supposed to be nervous about the serial killer running the hotel. But yeah, Rear Window, I would say, is just on a technical level, and not just that, the casting's great. Pretty much every actor in it's great. Even I can't remember the lady. She was in Rope as well, but she was this actress who played his like maid, and she's incredible. Like, yeah, and then like the whole cast is amazing. Rear Windows, just like a master class in like just fully controlled filmmaking. The way that everything's staged, the way the camera pans around this like neighborhood set, the believability of that set, um, the kind of full orchestration of that, it's kind of like a just unbelievable. Oh, nice! A rare or older flick I always liked was The Lady Vanishes. Yeah, that's a good one. I'm trying to remember. There was one I watched that was like, it was like black and white, and it had a Let me look it up. That was great too. But it has one of the coolest. Oh, and by the way, another reason I love Hitchcock is Saul Bass, man. I mean, the Saul Bass like sequences are just like a masterclass in design. But let me look up Hitchcock films. I went through a thing as a kid and then as an adult where I've watched like almost everything that Hitchcock made. But there's this early one that was like, was it called a number? Was it? Yeah, I can't. You know what? Maybe I won't find it. Oh, that was it. Okay, so there was this movie from 1929 called Blackmail, and that had one of the coolest posters. I gotta show you guys this. There's another one that I think has some of the coolest posters too, called "Murder" with an exclamation point. That one's great too. But it's like a lot of his early stuff was pretty pulpy. Like it's funny, he got way more sophisticated as he went, but like a lot of the early stuff was like pulp noir. Let's see here. Philip was saying, Psycho, the main character dies before it's halfway through the rest of the movie. It's carried by secondary characters. And that was a unique thing at the time, too. You never really killed the main character in like the first, half of the movie. Now that's pretty commonplace in a horror movie. Philip said Saul Bass is amazing. Way back in animation school, we did a study on him. Yeah, Saul Bass is like a killer artist, and sometimes an artist who drew killer. I don't. Oh yeah.
She did a lot of Hitchcock. Her name might have been Edna something.
Oh, Edith Head. Yeah. Mai was saying like, who was the fashion designer that did a lot of Hitchcock films that Edna Mode from The Incredibles was based on, and it's Edith Head. Okay, guys. We're going to play one more trailer because we finished that panel. And I think we're going to be done with this page in no time, which is, again, like encouraging after the last page that took like a week to do. This page, it's like, I can probably do the flats in like a day. All right. Well, to be fair, in like maybe a day or two. Okay. So here is the trailer for Wordzoid. Speaking of great directors, taking absurd premises and making them really cool. Here's Jim Lujan, friend of the show. Here's his Wordzoid.
Well, Peter, since I'm such a big music fan, I'm going to have to go with Karen Carpenter. Oh, Stu, I'm sorry. That's the incorrect answer. Trish, what you got for us?
I'm going to go with Kim Gordon.
All right, let's check that answer. Kim Gordon. Do we have a Kim Gordon? Yes, and that means you're our new Wordzoid champion, Trish. Dale, tell Trish what she's won. Trish, you've won a copy of 2 stories, a memoir of faith and mental illness. Handwritten, hand-drawn, and handed to you by artist and writer Joshua Kemble. But wait, that's not all. You've also won a copy of Jacob's Apartment, the story of a doomed romance. What happens when you take Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and put it in a blender with Ghost World? You get Jacob's Apartment, written and illustrated by Joshua Kemble. Trish, thank you for playing Wordzoid.
All right, great job, Trish.
I was told I was going to get a lifetime supply of paper towels.
All right, let's kick in the music and do our mid-show intro again. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're tuning in just now, this is Joshua Kemble's live stream, episode 308. We're working on page 80 of Not Death But Love, the strange supernatural story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and we're talking Hitchcock films and the birds. Let's talk about the strange murder of crows sighted outside in my neighbor's yard. And we're flatting and hanging out and working on art. I'd love to hear what you guys are working on. We were also talking about Saul Bass. Yeah, Saul Bass was like just unbelievable with composition. There's a part of me that really likes the whole movement that Saul Bass kind of created. It got in vogue again a couple years back, where a lot of movie posters were like riffing on Saul Bass. But he's one of those guys. I discovered this with design and illustration couple years back. Well, quite a few years back. But there's this weird thing you start noticing the more you study the history of art and animation and stuff like that, where quite often you'll think there's this style. Like Jessica Hish is a really good modern example of that in design, where you'll think there's like a style that's really trendy. And because there's so many products doing this one style, and then years later, at least this has happened to me multiple times, where years later you find out it's not a style. It's literally, I mean, it is a style, but it's not a group of artists working in one style. It's one artist just doing a crap load of prolific work. Um, and that kind of makes me think of like designers like Jessica Hish or Chip Kidd, where they've done so much work, or Saul Bass, where they've done so much work that it's almost incomprehensible. So it almost like, when I was younger, I would see like Hitchcock credits. I didn't realize these were all the same dude, you know? I like that style, but I would realize that it was all one guy. It's like growing up, you'd see Disney films and you see like Mary Blair's stuff without realizing it, and you're like, I like that one style that Disney does, and it's like, no, it's not a style Walt Disney did. That was Mary Blair, like every single bit. And then they become influential and do become a style, but it's like Charles Burns is another artist like that. It took me years to find out who Charles Burns was. I remember looking at like The Believer on the newsstands and being like, I love that style. And I'd look at like album covers and be like, oh man, that's a really cool style. Or like skateboard art. And I'd be like, that's really cool style. Or like a gig poster and be like, oh, that's a really cool style. And I find out it's all Charles Burns, you know? That's always a really cool discovery kind of thing. Have you guys ever had that with artists where there's an artist that you thought was just like a style, and you come to find out it's just one guy, or one girl, or or one person. To me, that's one of the coolest things about art. And I think as an artist, you can only kind of hope that that will happen. Where like your stuff just gets so saturated out there that people start thinking, oh, this is a cool style. Chip Kidd's a really good example of that too, where before I knew who Chip Kidd was, when I was younger, I bought, like one of the first big novels I read was Jurassic Park, and I was really proud of reading it because I was pretty young and it was like a lot of pages for a kid, and I got through it. I felt like, wow, this is cool. And not only that, I read it before the movie came out. So when the movie trailers came out, I had friends who were like all excited about this thing. I was like one of the few kids, in elementary school who could be like, and this is what's going to happen. With to a certain extent, I was able to say what was going to happen. They changed a few things in that from the book, but I had no idea that that Jurassic Park logo was Chip Kidd. I'd go to bookstores and like there were always these certain books that would catch my eye. And Chip Kidd's a tough one because not only is Chip Kidd like prolific, but also he has like a variety of styles. He works in like a ton of different styles. So I remember just like when I finally found out who Chip Kidd was and started looking at his body of work, it was like looking at almost every book that had caught my eye for like the last 20 years. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's all Chip Kidd. The whole thing. It almost feels like discovering like a conspiracy or something where you're like, oh my gosh, they're all connected. It was all the same person. And Saul Bass is definitely one of those guys where he's got this very unique style. A million people have ripped him off, but man, he defined an entire new approach to art. And the thing that's cool when you look into Saul Bass was he also did incredibly realistic like storyboards, which is insane. Like, so not only was he doing these like really cool kind of very shape based, grid based designs that were somewhat like modernist kind of take on design. But he was also like a really capable illustrator. I mean, if you guys are ever bored, just like look up, Saul Bass storyboards for Psycho. You'll be like, what? Like, it's one of those things kind of like that I feel when I found out Chris Ware is all like an incredible ragtime pianist. And I was like, okay, that's not fair. Do you guys ever get that? I feel like sometimes there's guys that have like too many talents. You know, like you should be allowed to be good at one thing and then okay at a bunch of other stuff. But but being like a master of more than one thing, that should be illegal. I'm kidding, of course. It's always like really cool, but we're getting close, guys. We're getting very close. Right now I'm trying to have the backstage be like a wood color. And we're just kind of deselecting browns here to kind of make this work. And I think we're going to get there.
Are you asking what the game's called?
And here we go. I'd love to hear what you guys are working on. Hopefully you guys are having a better kind of midweek than I was prior to this stream. Hopefully life is treating you guys very well. I gotta say right now, if you guys haven't, please hit that like button. Take like a minute or whatever, or it doesn't even take a minute. It takes like 10 seconds. Just hit that thumbs up. It helps other people find the stream. Helps game the algorithm a little bit. And I've been asking people, and since I've been asking people, like I've seen some traction from this. Like it's actually led to more visibility of my videos, which I really appreciate. So keep it up. Okay. So we're gonna do I wanna pull the let's open up page 79, the crazy page. Yeah, Ronnie said this year's been tough for me. Yeah. Sorry to hear that. Yeah, I had a friend recently. He's having a rough year. It's not the rough year part isn't funny. Just what he ended up saying was funny, where he said, "Man, I woke up this morning and was like, this must be one of the hardest years of my life." And he's like, and then I remembered Trump and COVID and like anyhow, so he was like, his whole point was, oh yeah, it's been like a really bad decade. Like it's been a bad like 6 years. Anyhow, it was I thought it was funny at the time. I can't phrase it as well as he did, but when he wrote that, I had a similar thing where I was like, I've had a pretty rough year. I've been very blessed, like there's a ton of great things in my life, but it's been a tough year, a little tumultuous, Um, but when I read that, it like reminded me like, oh yeah, like this has been just like crazy, like unprecedented amounts of just like turmoil in general, and I think a ton of people's lives. Um, yeah, it's been it. I feel like we've all been through like a marathon of just difficulties, and then you add just like regular struggles we're all gonna have in life, and it's like or struggles maybe we aren't all gonna have, and it just it's been a fun one. I'll put it that way. Yeah. But anyhow, I am never pleased to hear somebody's struggling. Okay. So we have a couple things here. I want to kind of differentiate the walls, and then I think the doors are going to match the theater red, possibly. I don't know if I like this being lighter. That just feels weird. Now I'm like questioning whether maybe this would be white. Okay. I think I have this solved. Okay. I think this might be white. Let's see if that works. And I'm just paying attention to the wall right now. Okay. I think I have a solution here for what's not working on this. Okay. So we are going to go white for the wall for this hallway. But I think we might potentially revise it further after the fact. But let's at least make that selection of the walls. I think the doors are going to be the red. I think I might revise the trim on the roof to be red as well, just so they feel like they're the same building. And then the nice thing is, this might take a little bit of time to make the selections, but the colors for the figures have already been pretty much chosen. So that part of this should go relatively quick once I get there.
I don't want to get back into that again. Well, now I'm just going to be playing Among Us Third Edition on that game, where you can make a hurt game. And, well, it's time for me to get right into it.
So as a kid, I think I was a little strange, like in the sense of like, at a pretty young age, I was watching a lot of Hitchcock movies, and a lot of classics, like old classics. And I didn't really realize that was unusual till like I was going to like elementary school, and I'd bring up something like Some Like It Hot. And like nobody knew what I was talking about. Because I just kind of assumed like everybody watched like old movies, and then or I'd have like a friend over to the house, and I'd be like, "Hey, we should watch this movie," and they'd be like, "But it's black and white." I don't want to watch it. And I'm like, oh, I guess that's not normal.
When did I ask for a screenshot?
So I've had like a love for kind of older films,
I literally didn't do
you know,
anything.
for quite a
I
while.
just took a random screenshot.
I think one of my favorite movies of all time is the movie The Apartment with Jack Lemmon. That might be in my like top 5 movies of all time.
Well, now I'm just going to play Puzzle Wonders. Oh.
But yeah, I think it's a little unusual for like a kid in elementary school to be like talking about their favorite like Neil Simon plays. You know, that's a weird kid. All right, so we have this. Now we're gonna just do the doorway.
A lot of possibilities that you can end up with making when you're at the.
And right now, I'm not sure if I'm like really sold on the Okay, and then I want the trim like right above the. Okay, we're gonna make this work. Okay, so one more kind of awkward deselection here. And then from there, like everything should go pretty smooth. We do have to fix that trim though, because I don't like the trim at the top toward the ceiling on this panel. I want to change that. And I think the sign, we might actually make that gold that's been kind of lining the building, because I think that's more authentic rather than like a wood sign. Luckily, this is like the next pages are going to be a little more challenging after this, because Bosco's dressing room is going to be full of, speaking of the birds, there's going to be a lot of pigeons in that dressing room. If this were the birds, Bosco would be in danger. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now is we'll color fill the areas that haven't been color filled in magenta, so we can start dealing with a few things I don't like about this page so far. I'm going to go ahead and turn continuous on my selections. And we're going to fix that up. I think that works a little better. And then I kind of want the backstage parts to be, I actually want this to be that gold, because I think that actually makes more sense. I'm not sure about the roof yet either. So let's see how this looks with shading. Okay, this is almost working, but now I think the red doors might be overkill. So I think what we're going to do instead is we'll make the doors themselves are going to be turned white, so they match the building a little better. And then I think what I'll do is the frame around the door could also possibly be in gold trim, or maybe that's overkill. Let's find out. Is that too much? Maybe the red was good. Maybe the red was good. Maybe it's the trim around the doors. I think it's just too close in value to the red, and so it's creating some issues. See if that works better. I don't think I like that trim. Let's try one other thing.
Description means decorations that don't match what the game.
Oh my goodness.
Description means is
My Photoshop is kind of flipping out. Okay, there we go. Hopefully I'm not having too many lags on this end.
Yeah, like decorations that don't match the other.
Maybe the door trim should just be white. Let's find out.
Like all the different decorations.
Hey, you know?
All of the different weird decorations are.
I can kind of live with that. Let's see about, should this roof be white? Because the building's roof is kind of white. And maybe the trim instead of red. Okay, I think we're getting there. Maybe the trim instead of red will be the gold. And then it has the floor color. That actually makes more sense. Okay, I'm happier with that. So we're going to save this. And then we're going to plug in our colors for our characters. And bust through the rest of this page. How are you guys doing? I want to hear what projects you're working on. I saw a sneak peek of what Ronnie's working on. Ronnie, let me know if I can show that on stream. Because it'd be fun to show people what you're working on.
And then I also have Bird Racer, which its description is you are racing against 4 other birds. Who will win? Warning, the result may be a tie.
All right. I feel like even his jacket is the same color as his hat.
I also have.
Who knows, though? I need to double check after just to make sure I'm not making a mistake there. Now that I think about it, I think the jacket might be a different color. We'll find out. Let's zoom out. Oh, thank God. Okay. My memory wasn't that off. So we're going to do the jacket here. Oh, nice. Ronnie gave the okay. So in a few minutes, we'll probably show a little sneak peek of Ronnie's art. I think it's a new panel. Okay. I feel like the pants here somehow got a different color. Am I crazy? Yeah, the pants somehow right here. Let's turn on continuous again. I think got a different color, and that shouldn't happen. So we fixed a panel, which is good.
For me, I'll probably just wake up at 6 or 7.
And I think what we'll do is here, and we have the pants, pantalones of Robert.
Right now, I'm just playing Lost Puppy, which is basically kind of like a racing game.
Okay, and I think there's also a bow tie that's going to have that same color.
And, well,
okay, and then we're going to do our shoes.
Yeah, basically kind of like a racing game.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this going a lot quicker. That's good news.
Except, well,
and now we're going to do Elizabeth. Her hair. And we should wrap up Robert, too. Christopher Runciman said, looking good, Joshua. Nice. I'm hoping, Christopher, to be done by 11 because you're streaming at 11, correct? How are the one-page comics coming? I hope they're coming along good.
Yeah, I want to have one birth breaker and only one race. I think I should probably try making it.
I've been really enjoying Christopher's streams. He does really awesome one-page comics based on suggestions by viewers, which is really cool and quite awesome. Okay, so we're going to do our white. We're getting there, guys. It's taking time, but slowly but surely. And I feel like Frank Salazar is missing to say, don't call me Shirley. Nice. Christopher said he got news of an awesome creator who's doing a write-up for his upcoming book. That's exciting. It's always good to get shout-outs, you know?
I think I'm going to have to... I think I'm going to change my... I think I'm going to change my character... I think I'm going to change the character that I play as in this one. I'm going to make the character that you play as...
Landon said, so what is the lighting supposed to be like in that... The lighting supposed to be like in that scene you're doing here? It's pretty dim, to be honest. I can show you. Okay. What I find is it's easier to flat just looking at the lines alone. And then to kind of, with this style, right? And then to kind of have the rendering after the fact, after I've made all my selections and stuff like that. So then we're going to do Robert. Christopher said, I'm a little giddy and delirious about that. I totally relate to that. You know, well, no, I've had some decent creators like give me pull quotes. And I remember the first time Alex Robinson was one of the creators that was like really nice and gave me a good pull quote. And he's done it twice, which is kind of incredible. But like, what a cool guy. I mean, he wrote what I think is arguably one of the best graphic novels, Box Office Poison. And when I had that, both times that's happened, I just felt not only giddy, but also geeked out because it's like, dude, this guy has no reason. There's a good feeling from it. Yeah, so I totally get that. So here we go. And I think we have our scene here. And we're kind of moving forward. Landon was asking if everything should have like a yellow or like umberish hue. It could. I'm trying to kind of keep in mind a rule of thumb that I had the head of my graduate committee was this woman named Robin Richardson, who's done a bunch of movie, mainly like movie fashion design and stuff. And I remember long ago she was saying, if you're ever working on a historical fiction story, you know, people usually will do like black and white or toned, like sepia toned feelings for like when you're looking at the past. And she was saying like things were actually a lot more colorful. People always kind of make that mistake with historical fiction where because like all the photographs of it kind of dampen a lot of the color, you know, it's not like everybody was just sepia, you know. So that's kind of like where I you know, but sepia wouldn't be a bad technique, but I feel like the toning, the color toning alone is going to kind of feel like that era. Like just the way it's like a tinted plate with fills. I do want it to be a little more bold with color for that reason. Now, I might be wrong on that call, but it's something I took to heart when I first heard it, was that idea of like, oh yeah, like things, you know, can be more colorful back in the day, you know. Christopher said these pages are kicking it. Kick it. Doom 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 doom. Sorry. I don't even like I love the Beastie Boys, but I would say Fight for Your Right to Party is not a song I like. Actually, that wasn't the song that got me into the Beastie Boys. But I do like the Beastie Boys. Like I don't think they were extremely good MCs, but I think sonically I love that sound of the Beastie Boys. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm going to make this thing out of grass ones, please.
So let's see here. We have a lot of this going down here. I'm actually kind of digging this. I think I will color hold that backstage notice there. And we'll see what we can do here. Landon is getting into warm and cool lights and their effect on color.
Maybe I should make this a cyber theme.
Thank you,
I think I'm
Landon.
just going to give this kind of like a cyber
Let's see here. So we are going to continue to kind of work our way through this. And we'll kind of see how that works.
Try to go all the way through the road and back to where we started. But
And I cannot wait to get into his office. It's going to be really cool once we get there. So now what we need to do is just get our doorknob thing here. And we're one step closer to done. And that's pretty exciting because I have to get caught up on this. Quite significantly need to get caught up on this. Okay. And then we've got our red here.
I didn't know about that. I think I might. Wait, I just remembered. You told me.
Still not.
I must have forgot.
I'm not sure if I like the red door thing. That might be the one thing I'm not really sure about on this page. Because I kind of think that the problem is if I have the okay, let's see what we can do here. Maybe we do something just a little bit more subtle. All right. Christopher said, here's a random thought. All of the striking writers, etc., could use you got to fight for your right to parlay. Nice. Nice, Mr. Runciman. I think we'll finish this page in time for Christopher Runciman's stream. That's my goal. That's my new goal here. And I think it's possible. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do our scene here. I do want to color hold some of these lines too. Yeah, I think why I didn't like the red door was it's just going to compete with the red of his outfit. And luckily, this part is completely invented. Whereas other parts, I have less freedom with the color because it's like an actual, like the theater itself is a real theater. So the colors in that had to be very similar. Whereas this, I can pull from those colors, but kind of invent a scene. And we have a good, healthy, 15 minutes till Christopher Runciman's stream. So I think we can get it done in time, and then maybe we can go invade Christopher Runciman's stream. We can treat it like a Normandy invasion. We'll my point is Christopher Runciman is an awesome cartoonist. So I think around noon, I think at like 12 o'clock, we should all go over there and check out his live stream. But before you do that, we got a panels to finish. And also, you have a like to hit on this stream. Hit the like button. Consider hitting the bell so you get notifications when we're about to go live. Christopher said, only if you invade the beach like John Wayne with your foot up on a rock. Nice. Philip said, sorry I had to run out. I'm back. Nice. We're finishing this up, and then we're going to all head over to Mr. Christopher Runciman's stream. And I think by 12, I think in the next 15 minutes, we can finish these flats and also do color holds on the lines. Because there's a couple lines that I think are going to be way more effective if we color hold them. And with this book, we're doing really minimal color holds. But I think it's possible. And also, I've talked about this before, but I kind of think as an artist, sometimes you can create little incentives, you know, to accomplish. And my goal right now, my incentive to get this done is I want to finish this in time to check out Christopher Runciman's stream and send you guys all over there too. That's what I want to do here. So, but before you head over there, I want you guys to hit that like button and also hang out with me for a second longer or two to see if I can hit this mark of finishing said pages. Okay, so there's a couple things I want to do real quick just to kind of spice this up. Needs of the spice. So one of the things I want to do is actually I want to have Bosco maybe written in white, weirdly enough. So let's try that. We're going to color hold that line. So it's just about painting over it. So let's turn off this. We'll see if this works. Oh, should have worked. Why is the color? Are we looking at the same color here? Okay. That's bizarre. Maybe there's still a selection. In theory, this should be working. I'm surprised it's not. Oh, I see. I see why. Okay. Now I see what's going on. We're going to grab all the areas that we want to color hold. I forgot that I had like a multiply effect on this. So we have 12 minutes, guys, to finish up this page. Give it a shot. I'm going to pick this backstage spot too. "12 minutes, ladies and gentlemen." I mean, the nice thing is, again, this page was not nearly as complex. And that's kind of the fun part about doing this sort of thing. Okay, edit, paste in front. Okay, now is time. Time has come. The time is now. So let's color hold the lines now. Let's see if this works now. Not working quite as effectively as I was hoping, so we'll see if we can resolve that in a second.
my new level, kind of like a cyber city.
I kind of want that to actually be, that could be in red. Okay, so there's a couple things we're going to do here. Now we're going to go and we're going to revise our other lines to, this should work. My shortcuts keep kind of like crapping out.
Right now, I'm literally trying to make this a city of cyber. And you're cyber chicken. I'm going to add a lot of houses.
And we're going to do our line here. And then we're going to go back up here. I dig that. Oh, come on. Why is my computer being all laggy? It's like when you need to actually like gun it, get stuff done. I don't know if I like that color now. So I want to see if there's any remainders of black. There are. Okay, that's what's going on. So we need to kind of go through here. Take out these sequences. Now, color holding, if you're not multiplying line art layers, is like relatively quick because you can just lock your transparent pixels and then paint over them. And that's where I was making a very basic mistake. Was kind of like trying to kind of add color held lines. I had forgotten. Ladies and gentlemen. Okay, here we go. Let's see how that looks. I kind of like that. I kind of don't like that tone though. I want it to just be on this. I'd like it to just be almost like it's engraved in there. And again, in this book, the style we're doing this in, whoa, on the wrong layer. The style we're doing this in is like relatively minimal. Let's try.
I'll be right back. I have to go wash my hands.
Try lowering this. We have 8 minutes, ladies and gentlemen. That's much better. I like that a lot. Okay, and now we're going to do... Did I do the tap? Let's see. Yeah, the tap is there, so we can get rid of the tap on these two layers. Now I'll relock these. And then we'll kind of go here, and maybe this will be white, potentially. All right, now let's see what happens when we add our layers. Why would that be happening? Interesting. Not a fan of that, what's happening there. So we got to kind of... Okay, so we got to kind of revise this a little bit, and then we should be good. We're going to erase this. I thought we would erase this. Let's see if that works. There we go. Look at this lovely tap. We're tapping it. That's right. I kind of dig it. We're going to call it. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for this page. Let's zoom out a little bit so you can kind of see. That's going to do it for this magical page. So we finished page 80, which I'm kind of excited about. All right, so Christopher said, sorry, Josh, I had to step away, running away again to get ready, but wanted to say that page looks great. Thumbs up, people. It's a celebration. All right, guys, that's going to do it. So I encourage you guys, if you haven't yet, go over to Christopher Runciman's stream. And I will see you guys on the next live stream when we get to working on page 81. I appreciate you guys, and I hope you have a good day. Goodbye.